So I forgot to mention at the beginning of my Iron Man video last week that all of my Marvel movie reviews are going to be completely spoiled for the entire MCU because I love the Marvel movies and I've seen them all multiple times and I like to compare things now and then and kind of reference other materials in the MCU. So if you haven't seen all of the MCU or if you don't care about spoilers, then you can watch the videos, but just beware that, they're going to contain spoilers for probably the entire MCU, so you have been warned. Hello, and welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is going to be my review for Marvel's 2008 film, The Incredible Hulk, the second film out of the MCU gate. So let's get into it.
In every generation, there is chosen one girl in all the world. She alone will review the movies, TV shows, and books of geek culture. I am the chosen girl.
So in Iron Man, we opened with the Paramount logo, and here in The Incredible Hulk, we opened with the Universal logo. I believe after the Avengers, it's just the Marvel Studios rebranded logo. Everything is just Marvel Studios after that. Universal has the distribution rights for the Hulk character, so that's why we haven't had any standalone Hulk movies since this first one, because Marvel and Disney don't want to share the rights with Universal, and so that's why Hulk has been popping up and everything else. And of course, we're going to see him in She-Hulk, so we're looking forward to that. Unfortunately, I think it has kind of hurt the character's arc a little bit, but we'll talk about that later, so let's get into the movie. So first off, we got to talk about the fact that this is Edward Norton playing Bruce Banner, and of course he's later replaced by Mark Ruffalo. This movie is canon with the MCU. I think we all kind of forget about that, because sometimes it doesn't really feel like it jives with the MCU, but it is technically still canon. This is supposed to be the Mark Ruffalo Bruce Banner in this Incredible Hulk movie. And of course, we've only had a couple of returning characters and actors come back, so it kind of often gets, I think, forgotten, because it also was the second movie to come out. I think Edward Norton does a good job here. I actually like him in this movie. I mean, I really love Mark Ruffalo in the first two Avengers films, but for me, I think they kind of took Hulk and Bruce a little too goofy lately, and he's kind of too comedic, and I really kind of think that maybe if Edward Norton had stuck around, he might have kept that kind of grounded scientist vibe of Bruce Banner rather than going into the goofy territory, making jokes all the time and stuff. And I know a lot of people like that in the new Hulks, but for me, I just prefer this kind of version of the early Bruce Banner Hulk, where he's still like conflicted with the idea of becoming this Hulk rage monster. But we'll get into that a little bit more. So the opening credits of this film show us the backstory of how Bruce had the failed gamma radiation experiment that turned him into the Hulk. And so we kind of get that whole montage throughout the opening credits, which is kind of a quick way to catch us up without having to repeat things that we probably already know about. Most people, I think, already know how Bruce Banner became the Hulk. So it's kind of a quick catch up, and it also shows that he's on the run from General Ross. So we pick up with Bruce Banner working at a bottling plant in Brazil, and he's like communicating encrypted code with this Mr. Blue character, and they're like trying to work on a cure for him. And I like this whole setup that we got here in Brazil. I think it kind of shows how resourceful Bruce is, how smart Bruce is, how he can adapt to different places and being on the run, and how he still is using his scientific mind to help out. Like you see, he's like working on the electrical equipment at the bottling plant, and the manager's like, "Let me promote you," and he's like, "No," because he wants to keep a low profile. But so I really like all of that. And then of course throughout the film we have this like countdown clock of like how many days till like a Hulk out incident, and I think that's really neat because it kind of helps us with the timeline, especially when Bruce is traveling from Brazil to the US. It kind of counts the Hulk, the countdown clock kind of helps, and then it comes in to play again later. So I like that we have this little countdown of incident, and I think that really kind of just helps tell us where in the timeline we are with Bruce Banner. In this movie, we established that Bruce needs to control his anger and keep his heart rate below, I think, 200 beats per minute, or he'll Hulk out, which is something that we just kind of throw away later on with the Hulk. I think later on, I think at the end of the movie, we figure out how he's learned how to kind of control that. But I kind of like it here that he's like constantly worrying about not getting too angry, not getting his heart rate up, or getting too stressed out. Like he can't even like sleep with Betty Ross because his heart rate gets too high, and she's like, you can't even like a little bit. So that's kind of like an interesting thing that we do with Bruce in this movie that doesn't really ever come back. But I kind of like that mechanism of how it's a way for him to monitor his Hulk out situations if he can just keep his heart rate under 200 beats per minute. I kind of like that. And I like Bruce chatting with Mr. Blue. It kind of builds the intrigue of who's Bruce chatting with. I think maybe kind of we're supposed to think like, is he supposed to be maybe somehow secretly communicating with one of Ross's people, or like we don't know who he's communicating with. Like we don't know if we can trust this Mr. Blue or not. He's like asking for blood samples. So I kind of like that we kind of keep that like intrigue of like who's he talking to. It's like the mystery, building up. And then, of course, in Brazil, we get introduced to the villain, Emil Blonsky. And he's kind of like a thinly written character whose only motivation is to, like, fight the Hulk and gain power. And, I mean, he's really just here to be the muscle. Like, really, General Ross is kind of the villain. And Blonsky's just here to be turned into the Abomination later and give something for Hulk to fight, which I think is really kind of not a good way to create a villain character. I think we need a little bit more build up, but we'll get more to Blonsky in a little bit. So then Bruce makes his way back to Virginia, I believe, and he like meets up with this like old pizza maker guy named Stan, and he also knows Betty, and he keeps up with Betty and stuff, and she knows that he's like dating someone, and he's only in there for like 2 scenes, and I kind of am like, why do we have this character? Like, who is he? How does he know these people? Is that like Bruce's uncle or something? Like, why do we have this character that comes in for like 2 scenes and pretty much does nothing? I mean, I kind of like the character and the actor, but I wish we would have maybe gotten more scenes with him, like secretly kind of helping out Bruce along the way or something, like to have him just come in and Bruce spend like one night there is kind of like, you can just, it's basically just a way for Bruce to run into Betty, and I just don't like it. I think it's kind of clunky writing. And then also we have Betty dating some dude that I don't even know his name. It's the dad from Modern Family, and he's also in like 2 scenes here to do nothing. So like, why do we have these characters that are just here for a couple scenes to not really do much, And then of course like Betty like immediately dumps him as soon as she sees Bruce, which is kind of like, poor guy, and they're like meeting in the rain, and it's a little over dramatic. They kind of really try to pull on those heartstrings, like, oh, the long lost love type of thing, and I don't really think it works. I don't think there's a super amount of chemistry between Edward Norton and Liv Tyler. I think she does fine in the role. I don't think she's given anything to do. The only reason she's there is because Bruce loves her, and somehow in Hulk form, Hulk has a connection to her, and she can kind of calm him down a little bit. Kind of reminded me of Black Widow and Bruce in Age of Ultron, where they're doing like the sundown hand thingy. It's kind of just like a way to calm down the Hulk a little bit, is all she's really here for. And one of the better scenes in the movie is the Hulk out at the university. I like that, he's like trapped in this like sky walkway thing with glass, and they throw the smoke in, and then like you see his eyes go green. It's like a really cool transformation, and he just like busts out and stuff. So I really like that whole battle scene there. I think that works really well. This movie does not have a lot of action, and then we get to see the Hulk in full form, because the scene in the bottling plant in Brazil, they kind of like hide the Hulk in the shadows and then the smoke and stuff, and you don't really get like a super good look at him. I mean, you see his face, but that's kind of it. So here it's like Hulk in the daylight, in the grass, fighting off the army. It's like a really cool scene, I think. And then I really like the sound cannons that they use. They're like emitting this like sound pulse that kind of like really slows Hulk down. And I kind of like, why don't we use that ever again? Like, that seems to be somewhat effective towards slowing the Hulk down. Never comes back. Also at this point, Blonsky is like taking some form of like low dose of super soldier serum or something, and like he immediately thinks he can take on the Hulk. Anyway, so he gets like tossed into a tree like a rag doll, but because he has the serum, he's able to heal, and then he's like says something like he's ready for round 3. The problem with Blonsky is that like he's in his own fight with Bruce and the Hulk, But Bruce doesn't even know who the hell this guy is. And Blonsky, like, I guess, counts, like, the fight in Brazil and then this fight at the university. And I'm like, Hulk wasn't even fighting you in Brazil. He was just fighting off the group of army. Like, why are you taking this so personally? You know? And so he's like, I'm ready for round 3. And so that's kind of a problem with the Blonsky, is that he's in his own thing that has nothing to do with Bruce. Like, there's no connection to Bruce. There's no parallels between the characters. Like, they're just two separate entities. And Blonsky just wants to fight him because reasons. And it's very not good motivation for a character. Again, Bruce doesn't even know who the hell this guy is. I just wish we had a little bit better motivation for why the heck Blonsky wants to become the Hulk and fight the Hulk. Like I said, really the villain of this is General Ross. So Blonsky's here just to be the thing that Hulk can beat up at the end. And then I think at one point they call out, like, General Ross says, like, you're using the SHIELD database to, like, find Mr. Blue. So that's kind of a good SHIELD call out. Because we don't get Agent Coulson, but we do get a SHIELD call out. So it's kind of another way to, like, build the world of the MCU, is that SHIELD is around and they're using their database. And so they find Mr. Blue and they track him down, and that's how they can find Banner. And so we finally meet Mr. Blue, aka Dr. Stearns, who has been secretly working on a cure, maybe with some grad students. And he's like replicating Bruce's blood, and he's got like this lab with vials of blood, and he's been testing on rats and stuff. And I'm not sure what he's doing. Is he working for Ross? Is he just funding his own independent operation? Like, didn't Bruce just give him his blood like a couple weeks ago? And this guy's already like replicated it and tested it on a bunch of rats? Like, it's not very clear what the heck Stearns is doing, and if he's working independently or if he's working with somebody. So that's all kind of messy. I did like the intrigue of building up like the Mr. Blue mystery, but it doesn't really have a great payoff. They kind of just rush the Stearns stuff at the end to kind of try to cure Bruce, and then he turns Blonsky into the Abomination. And then they kind of tease like Stearns gets like some of Bruce's blood into his cut on his head, and he's gonna like maybe become the leader, which is a character from the comics that he becomes, but that character never comes back, so we don't know what happened with him. I would be curious to see if like we ever did follow up with that thread. Like, is he out there just being the leader? Like, we don't know. We'll never know. So the ending is kind of interesting. Like, we think that like Bruce is like maybe cured, and then he like jumps out of a helicopter, hoping that he's not cured, and then like he hits the ground and he becomes the Hulk. So I guess it was never a real cure, but it doesn't really explain how the Hulk gets triggered then, because did it cure the whole, you don't have to go over 200 beats per minute to trigger the Hulk, or is it like, what triggers the Hulk now? Falling out of a helicopter? So it's a weird kind of ending. Like, I wish they had kind of wrapped that up a little bit better. But I do like the fight between the Hulk and the Abomination. So Blonsky goes to Stearns wanting to, I don't know, get whatever the Hulk has, but even Stearns is like, you already got some stuff in you. I don't know how any of this is going to mix together. And of course, it doesn't. It's an abomination. And so he becomes the Abomination. Again, why does Blonsky want to become a monster to take on the Hulk? Like, I don't think he's thought any of this through. I mean, I guess it's if it's based off of like the Captain America Super Soldier Serum, where, you know, the doctor says like it amplifies who you are on the inside. I guess maybe, you know, Blonsky was kind of a monster on the inside, so he like literally becomes a monster, right? I don't know how it works, but so anyway, he becomes the Abomination, and they fight with the Hulk, and Bruce calls it Harlem in Avengers. And it's actually a pretty cool fight scene. At one point, Hulk like rips a car in half and like uses it as like boxing gloves. That was pretty cool. And then does like the Hulk clap to put out the fire. That was pretty cool. So I really like that scene, the whole fight scene at the end. I thought it's a pretty good fight. It's not the kind of spectacle that we've come to expect from Marvel, but it's still a really good kind of big monster battle scene, I think. Just a small note, though, I think that the design of the Hulk in this film is kind of poor. I really like the Ruffalo version of the Hulk a lot better. I don't like the, like, stringy, wet bangy hair coming down the front of the Hulk's face in this movie. It's a bad look, I think. And I think that what they do in the CGI with both the Hulk and Abomination coming in later, I think is really kind of up to the characters. Like, Abomination doesn't look good either. And the Hulk, I mean, the CGI itself is okay, but like the character design doesn't look great. So I really like the upgrades of that. So overall, I do like this movie. I like Bruce kind of learning to control the Hulk and his heart rate and everything. I think that the movie starts really good, ends really good. I think that whole middle section kind of slows down once he meets Betty a little bit. And I think this movie just overall kind of gets forgotten because there's not really a lot of memorable characters, not a lot of memorable scenes. And like I said, we really only have gotten the Abomination back recently and General Ross, and obviously we replaced Edward Norton, so I think people tend to forget about this movie a lot, but it's actually pretty good. I think it's not my favorite of the Marvel films. The more I watch it, the more I kind of like it, but it still has the same problems every time. I think Blonsky is just not a good villain in this, and I think the romance between Bruce and Betty is not executed very well. But I think overall, I think the story that we're telling with Bruce, and I think the fight scenes are really good too when he hulks out. So I think that's all some good stuff. You know, Iron Man had a lot of energy and witty dialogue and like kept the pace going that I think this movie kind of lacks. There's not a lot of comedy in here. There's a couple of good lines kind of towards the later half of the film. The movie kind of needed a little bit more better dialogue between the characters. It just doesn't have the same energy that Iron Man had. This movie doesn't really fit with the rest of the vibe of the Marvel MCU movies. And so I think that's why a lot of people also forget about it as well. There is also an end credit scene to this. Tony Stark meets General Ross in a bar, and he's like says that, oh, we're putting together a team. But in Avengers, Tony says that like he's not qualified. He didn't qualify for the Avengers or something, and like Fury's the one in Shield and Coulson are like the one going around recruiting people. So why is Tony here trying to recruit? I don't know, General Ross's. Who's he recruiting? Ross, the Abomination? Is he trying to get Ross to recruit the Hulk? Like, this whole scene doesn't really make any sense going forward with the MCU. I think it was just kind of like a teaser, and they still weren't really sure what they were going to do. But it's kind of cool to see Tony Stark pop up here and see him interact with General Ross here, because we know how they interact later in the MCU. So that's kind of a fun end credit scene there. And so that's my review for The Incredible Hulk, the 2008 film starring Edward Norton. I still think he did a pretty good job, and I kind of wish we would have got to see what he would have done with the character. But that's okay. I really like Mark Ruffalo. I wish they would maybe kind of fix the Hulk character a bit. But I really did like this movie. I think it's a solid second entry into what becomes the MCU. And speaking of Hulk, he's coming back for She-Hulk, of course. So I'll be doing my weekly reviews of She-Hulk starting Wednesday. So stay tuned to the channel for that. So those are my thoughts on The Incredible Hulk. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you like it? Do you love it? Do you rank it really high in the MCU movies? Do you rank it really low? For me, it's kind of still towards the bottom, even though I think it's a good movie. But I like all of Marvel movies anyway, so I still think it's pretty good. So let me know what your thoughts are. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel for more videos. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button to like, share this video around, and stay tuned again every week for the She-Hulk videos. And until then, you won't like me when I'm hungry. Wait, no, that's not right. Angry. Bye, everyone.